Facebook. If you just search for Patriots of Act 746, that's Patriots of Act 746. It is a closed group, but ask to be a member. 12,000 strong, that group. Very educated on Second Amendment rights. And we'll hear more to talk more about that. We've got Mr. Tim Loggins back with us this morning, bright and early. Tim, welcome.
Good morning, Paul.
Yes, sir. Good morning to you. So how are things going? How you been doing?
Well, I'm blessed. The Lord's treating me better than what I deserve, probably. Our movement's going well. The Northeast Arkansas chapter's going well. Family life is good. I'm blessed.
Good. Yeah, I think I would agree with that as well, definitely. So talk just a little bit about, we've got the Patriots of Act 746, and you guys are doing great work. One of the problems, I think, and I know there was a lot of, let's just take, for example, the concept of open carry, which is a real thing in Arkansas now, thanks to Act 746. In the beginning, in the infantile stages when people were figuring out what this new law change was all the way back in 2013, there was an effort, a grassroots effort, to contact local law enforcement and actually go on demonstrations and walks. The people would go and they would walk downtown, open carrying their firearms, trying to educate people about what the law was. And that's true, right? I mean, did you participate in any of that stuff, or did you know anyone who did?
I knew some folks that did. I didn't do any walks at that time. I was still employed in law enforcement at the time.
Okay. So I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is this was an effort to try to unify the state, to try to educate people as to what the law was, which was, basically possession of firearms or a weapon have been decriminalized. The burden of proof is so high to convict somebody of just merely possession of a weapon. You have to be able to convict them of unlawful intent while carrying, which means you have to be able to read their thoughts, or you have to have someone dumb enough to text somebody, I'm on my way to kill you with my gun while I'm open carrying. That's going to be hard to prove. My point is there at the time it was hard. There was a patchwork of laws. You had some law enforcement heads that just didn't want to recognize it. We have the Arkansas State Police that still are allergic to this in many ways. I think that's slowly going away. But with this idea of having a patchwork of laws, depending on where you are located in the state of Arkansas, is not good government. And it's not, I think, what anybody, whether you're against the Second Amendment or not, I think everybody wants to know within reason how they're going to be treated by law enforcement and what freedoms they have or what they're going to be arrested for. Do you agree with that, Tim?
I agree. That was the initial response by law enforcement, and it's still the response of the state police to some extent. Honestly, Paul, our governor has made us digress just a little bit on that. His recent opinion to the state police says it's up to the individual county prosecutor on whether to charge or not, and that's actually contrary to Arkansas law. We have a preemption law in Arkansas. The law should be consistent all the way across the state, and the prosecutors don't get to choose, depending upon the area, whether they're prosecuted or not. So we had some false information by the governor that's, I don't know if I want to say it's made us take a step back, but it's like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I set it up with the people who were going on these open carry marches all the way back from 2013.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. Good morning to you. Happy Monday. Thanks for starting the beginning of your week with us here. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. My name is Paul, and we are building a liberty machine, and it's one that stands in defiance of the Marble Palace establishment here in Arkansas. If you want to help us do that, one of the ways you can contribute is just a call or text. Let us know what's going on, 870-275-9799. You can also sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. That's facebook.com/Conduit News. We have a lot to get to. At the top of the next hour, we're going to be talking with State Representative Brant Smith. Will be stopping by. He'll be here in studio. Then at the bottom of the next hour, we'll be talking with the co-founders of Conduit. Mr. Joe Maynard and Brenda Vassar-Taylor will be on the program. So last week, I was very confused last week by some of the statements that Governor Asa Hutchinson made concerning this program, what he referred to as a machine, a media machine. And I didn't understand why he did it. I didn't understand when he did it, the day that he did it. Something just didn't seem right. Something seemed a little bit, a little too off the cuff, outside of his carefully crafted language. I will say this, though, when the governor came out and criticized Conduit, he certainly got the mainstream media to latch on to what he was saying. There were several articles. There was a Talk Business article. There was a Michael Wickline article in the Gazette. There was a John Brummett editorial on what the governor said. And lastly, the last article was this Northwest Arkansas editorial from the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Now, granted, this is an article on what the governor said to the Political Animals Club about Conduit and about this concept, this phony concept of one person one person trying to control the legislature, which is, if that person exists, is Governor Asa Hutchinson himself. Okay, so to be very clear there, and I am going to prove it to you this hour. Are you ready? Not in my words, but in the words of legislators. But before we do that, why did Governor last week start to attack this program? Why did he say that Conduit News is not real news? Why did he say those things? First off, let's look at this article. Northwest Arkansas editorial, Fighting the Fringes, Hutchinson issues warning about political groups. I mean, this is as hypocritical as you can possibly get. But how do they start the article? How do they start the article when attacking Conduit? Listen to what they say. Back in the days when Asa Hutchinson was the youngest U.S. attorney in the nation, appointed by a gentleman named Ronald Reagan, there was a little group of terrorist thugs operating in Arkansas known as the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord. The group was building up quite a stockpile of arms, and extremist views ran in the same circles as the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nation, and harbored men wanted in connection with murder. Are you kidding me? This is how they start, because, of course, Asa Hutchinson calls Conduit an extreme group, right? An extreme right-wing group. Really? I mean, I think people who have honest disagreements with lower taxes and less regulations would find the beginning of this article just a little much. And again, it's just very strange. Now, it goes on. Their activities drew the attention of law enforcement, leading to a 4-day standoff at a compound near the Arkansas-Missouri line. Hutchinson, who would go on to prosecute some of the group's members, put on a bullet-resistant vest and walked into the compound to negotiate its bloodless end. Now, I want you to know something, because I read social media and I know what Asa Hutchinson fanboys out there say. And this is what they're saying. They're trying to promote the idea. Remember when Asa Hutchinson put on a bulletproof vest and walked in there? This whole article was written It was basically the ideas came directly from the Re-elect Asa Hutchinson campaign. Directly from there, because if you read it, it's all stuff that you can find Asa Hutchinson fanboys out there saying, okay, on social media and so forth. But I was wondering, why was it that Asa Hutchinson did what he did last week? Why did he finally go out and attack? Because I got to be honest, we've had, our as far as our views and things like that, we've actually had more people interested in the information disseminated on this program. And I will tell you what it is. It dawned on me this weekend when I was reading the headlines this weekend. I have been speaking out against the corruption in Arkansas for a very long time. We've been talking about the FBI investigations. We've had sources tell us about indictments coming. Indictments have come. We've heard that there are more indictments on the way. We've heard that there's such a culture of corruption in Arkansas. Max Brantley now reporting as many as 20 legislators. Back in October, my source was saying it was anywhere from 15 to 17. So I think we're pretty much lining up. We have legislators now, and they're now coming out, former legislators coming out saying they took $100,000 in bribes, and that's when it hit me. That's when it hit me, folks. If you're at the top of the heap, whether it leads to you or not, and you're just a part of the status quo, if the level of Arkansas corruption that I believe is about to be unveiled to everybody, and this program is pretty much the only voice who has been out there day in and day out demanding that Jake Files resign for a second, or for instance, when Asa Hutchinson wouldn't, when the Republican Party of Arkansas wouldn't. We've been telling you about the corruption in Medicaid and a $2 billion program for a long time. And if all of a sudden we're the lone voice and all of a sudden everything we've been predicting and all of the corruption surrounding this turns out to be revealed to everybody, guess who starts to look pretty bad? The people in power. The people who've been protecting the status quo, the people who've been saying there's nothing to see here. And I think it all started when Rusty Cranford was in the paper last week accused of trying to hire a guy to kill that New Jersey lobbyist. I think that's when it all started. And then it all kind of, a nice little bow on the week when we have this headline. Former Arkansas legislator's name surfaces in graft case. Joe, go to this article. Henry Hank Williams IV, county judge of Jefferson County, took $100,000 in bribes from indicted lobbyist Milton Russell Rusty Cranford while serving in the Arkansas legislature, an assistant U.S. attorney said Friday. The money purportedly was given in the form of donations to a Pine Bluff church where Wilkins is pastor. And they should put pastor there in quotes, by the way. They should say where he is, quote, pastor, end quote. So the guy basically used the church as a way to conceal a $100,000 bribe. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Molenrick made the statements during Cranford's arraignment on corruption charges Friday in Missouri. Why is it Missouri that's involved in all this? Why isn't Missouri prosecuting all of this? Where's Arkansas prosecutors? This is all coming out of Missouri. This is all coming out of another state. Wonder why our prosecutors aren't doing anything about this. Wilkins, a longtime state and county elected official and church pastor, has not been charged with any crime, according to available federal court records. He did not respond Friday afternoon to several telephone and email messages from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Wilkins made the bribery admission in a February 22nd statement to the FBI, according to government attorneys. That was the day after Cranford's arrest on corruption charges in an alleged scheme in which executives for a Springfield, Missouri-based behavioral healthcare provider paid bribes through Cranford's lobbying firms to obtain state grants and other taxpayer money. Ouch. It's all coming out, folks. Every bit of this is coming out. Now, they're saying, now if you flip on over to Max Brantley, okay, let me see this article here. Max Brantley writes, bombshell of a story this morning from Doug Thompson. He has more on this. Keep going down here, Joe, until I find what I'm looking for here. Because eventually it talks about how, okay, so stop here. It's not just Cranford's first link to the illicit behavior with legislators. He's mentioned but not charged in the scheme alleging kickbacks from state surplus accounts known as GIF that produced a guilty plea from Micah Neal, Senator John Woods, and former Democratic Representative Eddie Cooper, who went to work for Preferred Family Health. Okay, keep going down. This I don't know how far this is going to go. I really don't. Eventually we find. Okay, yeah, keep going. Max Brentley writes, I've been told for weeks there was more to come. Last week, a lawyer with knowledge of Wilkins, okay, this former state rep county judge in Jefferson County. Last week, a lawyer with knowledge of Wilkins' involvement with Cranford predicted disclosure soon. He said there were reports of numerous legislators who'd made proffers, sworn accounts of what they'd be willing to say in court to federal investigators. He said as many as 20 legislators could be involved. Again, Max Brantley of the Arkansas Times. Okay, folks, so what do we have to see here? What do we have to see? You may choose to believe it's just a coincidence that the week when all of this is starting to really gain steam, Asa decides to come out and attack this program and call us a media machine. Of course, I mean, I've never been on MSNBC or CNN. He gets to go on there anytime he wants. So, I mean, you be the judge who the media machine is, who really has the bully pulpit. I mean, I'm just a talk radio host. I'm just trying to get people the truth. And I think when they hear it, they realize what it is, and they realize they've been sold a pack of lies. But, hey, it is what it is. I don't believe it's a coincidence that all this stuff starts to come out the week he decides to get involved and start to try to push back against this. Because we've been the lone voice pushing out the corruption, pushing back against the corruption, and nobody else has seemed to want to do that. I mean, there have been a few legislators. Brian King would be one. Josh Miller would be another. And there are others, but you know what I mean, who have actively been saying, look, there's a lot of money involved here, and there's a lot of corruption going on behind the scenes. And now we have legislators apparently willing to testify in federal court of what they know. This is a really, really big deal. And it's only going to get worse. We're going to find out more. And I just have a feeling that the Marble Palace political establishment status quo is going to be, public opinion is going to be like, we don't think this is good, and more people are going to know. And you know what? It could have been as simple as Governor Hutchinson learning, whoops, all of this is about to come out, and it's going to come out before the primary in May, not after the primary in May. John Woods goes to trial in April. So maybe there's just a little bit of nervousness from the Marble Palace establishment and those who attend its court. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to highlight this concept, this accusation of control, and I'm going to show you this hour who really controls the Marble Palace. And it's not the people. It is the people who want something from government. And then, the disdain that is out there for people who try to participate in the electoral process but don't want anything back from government. They just want the people who want things from government and use force against the people to not have access to be able to do that anymore. Then all of a sudden, the people who want the liberty and the freedom are the enemies. Very, very interesting. Huge displays of hypocrisy right now from the Marble Palace elite, and we'll continue to expose it. This is Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in a moment.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, so the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette editorial we were just going over that gets this close from directly comparing the dissenting voices of liberty and freedom today with neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members, if it doesn't really actually do that. They write, they quote Governor Hutchinson's quotes from last week. Quote, "Right now, our state has a special interest group in Northwest Arkansas that is controlled by one person who is using various conduits, including a media arm, to pump tens of thousands of dollars in order to control legislators. This is not good for our state or the body politic. Their goal is to push a narrow an agenda of isolating our state, limiting its growth, and shutting down government. So you can expect me to be engaged in that political fight as needed, because we don't need our legislators controlled by anyone except for the people of their district," Hutchinson told last week's luncheon attendees. This is the most hypocritical statement probably of the year so far. Maybe there's more to come. So I decided to do a little bit of a flashback for you guys to illustrate who really controls who really is representing their people. The ones who try to represent their district are ostracized and are threatened. That is the truth of the matter by the Marble Palace. If it's not Hutchinson's way, it's nobody's way. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth, and to think anything otherwise would be extremely naive. This is what I did last year. After the session last year ended about April or so, I sat down with as many legislators as I could, and I asked them their impression of the session from 2017. And many of them had very bad things to say, and eventually they get to the governor. Some get to the governor about how they weren't allowed to run certain bills. Listen, we're not going to be able to listen to all of it, but I've got some highlights for you. We're going to start at the top. Here was Senator Gary Stubblefield when we did this impression of the session, and then we put it together in a montage. Listen to this.
It's one of those sessions where I think there was a lot of pressure. It seemed like it was unusual. I've been through 4 of these now, and this one was a lot different because it seemed like early on there was a lot of pressure building up among the different members in the Senate and the House then. And some strange things happened. I don't know. You know, I know they voted on the other end to allow the speaker to have the discretion to choose all the committee members, and basically gave away their tenure, and that was kind of the shock.
Have State Representative Kim Hendren.
And so this last session, there was a rule change brought by the Speaker that he appoints all committees, all chairmen, and all vice chairmen. And I don't agree with that. I think that's wrong. I have told the Speaker that personally. What's happened is it's all consolidated. And I just say this, Paul, and your listeners need to understand. I hope they'll understand this. We've got 135 members in that legislature down there. No member down there ought to get 2 bites at the apple before the one with the least seniority, the last one in there, gets the first bite. And that's what's going on over and over and over again, and it ought to be stopped. And the only people that can stop it are the voters of the state of Arkansas, and they will stop it if they know what's going on. I don't go around saying I'm going to look at your skill set, decide what you need to do, and then put you in a committee. Because when that kind of stuff happens, you owe somebody. And that's the problem that's going on down there right now. More and more power is getting concentrated in fewer and fewer people.
State Representative Brand Smith from District 58. Take as long or be as brief as you want. Just in general, what is your impression of the session 2017?
Well, overall, I think it was fairly successful, and I use the term fairly because there were bills that were brought before the House that were divisive, caused a lot more anxiety than perhaps we wanted.
A total of $380 million in proposed or passed taxes. That makes limited government conservatives that want to keep their money a little nervous. What are your thoughts on that, Senator Johnson?
They didn't make it through. So there was a total of about 17 million that made it through. It don't matter what's proposed. There's a lot of stuff proposed. 2,000 bills were proposed. You know, some of them were for revenue and some of them were for law changes. But the ones that matter are the ones that passes through the system. It's a complex system. There's a lot of physically conservative that voted against those measures, and they didn't make it through.
But I mean, what was your impression of this past session?
Well, it's nobody but us and your listeners here, so I'm going to be honest with you. This session was pretty much a joke. We lowered income taxes on our tax bracket of folks that don't pay income taxes usually, and what they do pay, they make money on when they get their taxes back. And then, we continue to fight for and uphold Obamacare in Arkansas. We continue to not fully fund programs for the truly needy. And on top of that, we managed to raise a few fees and taxes. I mean, exactly what you would hope for out of a Republican stronghold legislature and governor.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion.
On that last statement, that last statement, I'm picking up your sarcasm.
Exactly. Yes. And let me completely clarify. I am being 100% sarcastic. It was pathetic. It was just pathetic. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the taxpayers have every right to be aggravated and ashamed.
State Representative Jack Ladyman, he's from District 59.
It was tough. It was a really tough session. We discussed, passed, and failed some very important issues, I thought. Josh Miller's bill to put a cap on the Medicaid expansion. He had a bill. I was on the Health Committee, and we debated that quite a bit in the Health Committee, and it passed out of the committee, passed on the floor. I talked in favor of that on the floor and in the committee. I thought it was a good move, even though we don't know what Washington's going to do. That is something that we can do in Arkansas to limit where this thing's going, and I believe
right now it's up.
The finances are going to get out of control.
With 76 Republicans in the House, were your expectations met?
No, we didn't do what I thought we could do. There were a lot of things that I thought we could pass that did not pass. The biggest thing that bothered me, again, was the number of bills that proposed tax increases. Didn't expect that. I thought that we would at least cap the Medicaid expansion.
Marcus Richmond with us from District 21.
Well, I think that there were some things that we did, and we did it well. But at the same time, I think there was room for improvement. We need to be, I believe, just a little more imaginative than constantly trying to figure out some way to increase some tax somewhere. And then dealing with, the internet sales and those type of things, you can say what you want, tell everybody that it's not a new tax, but if you haven't been paying it, as far as everybody's concerned, it is a new tax. If we're going to call ourselves Republicans, we need to look at the party platform and consider what's in that, as far as, smaller, more efficient government, trying to be efficient with the tax revenue, looking for ways that we can allow the people to keep as much money as possible. And I think that in order to do that, and again, this is one of my frustrations. I was happy that, there were some tax cuts, but then when you look at how the tax cuts were done, we really just kind of shifted obligations around. And
Stop. That is the new majority leader of the House now. That's State Representative Marcus Richmond, and we'll be back here in just a moment with more of news you need to know. In 2014, trying to educate, trying to not have a patchwork or a kind of a very arbitrary enforcement of the law depending on which county you're in or which city you're in. That was the effort of these marches. That was the effort of these open carry walks. That's what they were trying to do, raise awareness and get local law enforcement on board with the changes, because the media sure didn't want to champion what had happened. They weren't doing a good job unless it was mildly controversial. And so this was the effort. And so what I would say is I would take it and say I think Asa, with his stance, is actively working against the efforts of grassroots people who have been trying to change their government and get their local officials to be made aware of what the law actually says. And it did change back in 2013. And I think it's a shame when he says it's up to your local prosecutor as to whether or not, check if you want to open carry, check with your local prosecutor. Well, what kind of Wild West government are we running here? And I throw that in their face because I know they're the ones that say if we have guns, it'll be the Wild West. No, I'm talking about what kind of, I mean, we need to have a reasonable expectation that government's going to work for the people. And that means we need to know if we're going to be charged with a crime for exercising our rights to defend ourselves by open carrying. And the law provides that you can open carry. And so why would I need to check with the prosecutor? Why wouldn't the governor come out and say, well, of course, I know he's protecting the Arkansas State Police and that all that revenue they get from the concealed carry permits. But what I guess I would think, within reason, anyone would think that is just not good government. You don't want to treat citizens unequally based on where they live.
Paul, I don't know the governor. I haven't met him. I can only go on his public statements. You know, he, on more than one occasion, he has called the Second Amendment a privilege and not a right. And let's keep in mind that a privilege can be granted and a privilege can be revoked. So he truly believes that government has the authority to grant or not someone the ability to carry a weapon. So I would think his opinions and what he's doing, he's consistent in what he believes, and he's actually trying to circumvent the laws that are on the books right now, and trying to get what he wants as opposed to what the law says.
I think you're definitely right. So where do you think we go from here, and just in terms of this impasse? I mean, the highest elected office in the land has essentially said, is actively working, I think, against the grassroots who've tried to bring public attention to this change, and it's been since 2013. By the way, we've had this. I mean, what happens here? I mean, at some point, I just don't see how they can. And see, the prosecutors.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so we've just been addressing some of the news of the day, but we are also doing it in flashbacks. You see, there's this false accusation. There's something called, like, there are 7 ways we've counted to grow that the establishment uses to grow government, and we need to go back over those. Matter of fact, we'll do that sometime this week. But one of those ways is projection and deflection. So in order to deflect what you yourself are guilty of, you project the very thing you're guilty of on your political opponents. And this is what the Marble Palace establishment is doing. They want you to assume that right now, as it stands at the Marble Palace, it's a utopia, and that every legislator is allowed to legislate the way he or she chooses according to what their constituents want, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is a lie. There are people out there, and that one of the reasons Conduit News is here to give you the news is an attempt to liberate those legislators so they can think for themselves, so they don't have to be beholden to a corrupt establishment. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to continue to expose this. We're going to continue to give you the news. Now, if you're just joining us, good morning to you, but we're just dissecting Governor Asa Hutchinson's comments saying that, we've got to fight. He criticized Conduit News last week, called us a media machine because we're on different stations across the state, criticized Conduit for action because of the articles up there, criticized us for saying that he's raised taxes because, well, he disagrees. He doesn't think he has, but we've pointed out that he has raised taxes and the tire tax and things like that. We've criticized him for a lot of things, the spending increases and everything else. So he criticized Conduit News, said that we're not actual news. He was harder on Conduit News than he has ever been on the Arkansas Times, than he's ever been on John Brummett or anything else. It's fascinating if you actually look at it. So we just wanted to do a little flashback. I decided last year after the session and the disaster of a session where they tried to raise taxes and they increased spending, I sat down with as many legislators as I could and I got their impression of the session. And so we're kind of going through the highlights of that. And now keep in mind, it's the governor who wants you to who wants you to assume that he is not controlling these legislators at all. They don't feel controlled. It's somebody else. It's an outside group that's trying to control them, and we've got to stop that. Just keep that in mind. That is his allegation as we listen to the rest of this impression of the session montage. Take it, Joe.
Against you. And I'll tell you something else, Paul, that I know.
Gary Stubblefield.
This is really troubling to me. I've been there going on 7 years, and sometimes I wonder why we even meet as legislators whenever you have these special interest groups and these large corporations. That we can work for weeks and months on bills or pieces of legislation trying to get them together to present. And all these groups have to do is come in and make one statement, and the whole thing is just turned upside down.
Josh Waters is from Political Strategy. What's your impression of the session 2017?
Well, if you would have asked me that with about 2 to 3 weeks to go in this session, I think it'd been a much different answer, because the last 2 or 3 weeks, the internet sales tax and the gas tax hikes were defeated. And so going into those last few weeks, if those would have passed, this would have ended up being a session of over $300 million of tax increases. Overall tax, it would have.
Until we get a group of legislators who have a real backbone and are willing to stand up to some of these, I don't see things changing in the near future.
We had some very positive things, and then we had some disappointments. I was disappointed that as a Republican majority that we, kept our expanded Medicare program. It's just, it will end up bankrupting us. And, I think it was Ronald Reagan that said that we measure the success of government by the amount of people that's not dependent on government. I voted against the increases of taxes, like the internet sales. First of all, I think that's an interstate commerce. I think that's a federal issue and not a state issue, because I can't imagine another state passing a law that I have to know about and that I have to be accountable to them for, and I have no representation.
We have massive Republican majorities down there. And yet, some of the key pillars of the Republican Party platform, like not increasing taxes, kind of seem to be ignored.
Well, I agree with that. I think that's key. I was sitting in county government for 20 years on the Garland County Quorum Court, and in those 20 years, the only tax increases we had were the ones that people themselves voted for. We were able to live within our means. It didn't mean that we didn't cut. It didn't mean that we didn't, change some of the things that we're providing, that we quit providing. But it's not incumbent on government to provide for everybody and to meet every whim that we want.
Why do they need the money? Why do they need more money from us?
Because government loves to spend money. And what I think we all look at is there's always going to be more needs than there is money. At a certain point, should we all just send our wallets and our checkbook to Little Rock and say, you just take what you think is fair and send it back when you're finished? Because there's always going to be a compelling reason. And believe me, I visit with people. I go to a lot of different agencies and move around to my district and across this state, and there are needs out there. What I think we have to address is, what of those needs need to be getting handled at the local level and what need to be handled at the state level. If you want less centralized government, then you've got to have, more of a focus on your local government, and you got to do more at the local level.
President of the Family Council, Mr. Jerry Cox, is on the line. Locker rooms, and people are trying to go in this locker room or that locker room. So it is a problem. But that, down at the Marble Palace, they tend to say, hey, this isn't really a problem. We don't need to be doing this. So what all happened behind the scenes there?
Well, it's all said and done. Some of this stems all the way back to 2015, when we were able to pass a religious freedom bill that a number of LGBTQ individuals thought somehow would infringe on their rights. And so they all came to the Capitol and they protested and carried on. And I think the governor and some other lawmakers decided, you know what, we don't want those people back out here, and the best way to keep them home is to not run any legislation that aggravates them. And so early on, the governor said, we don't need a bathroom privacy bill. It's just a common sense kind of bill, but the governor and others said, not necessary, not a problem, but are we going to wait until some little girl is molested in a bathroom by some man before we say it's a problem? I thought we were about preventing bad things from happening rather than waiting for it to happen. And see, once the governor made his pronouncement that this is not a problem and we don't need this, then far too many lawmakers just kind of sat down and said, well, okay, then we won't do anything.
Yeah.
And that I find very disappointing.
Talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield, people going into locker rooms they got no business going into. Do we really govern ourselves? Do we really, we the people, have a say? Or is it Walmart or, like you said, the NCAA or the SEC?
Well, it's come down to money over safety as far as I'm concerned. We had, the government kept saying we had no real issues, but that was not exactly true because I was dealing with 2 or 3 issues in my own district, and I knew of several others in other districts who were having to deal with the same kind of thing. And some of these schools felt powerless. They were going to be sued, and they were told that they would lose the lawsuit. And they really were looking for somebody to give them some advice because we had nothing in statute that would protect them. And we were just trying to bring it back to local control and let them, decide what's best for them. But we were even shut out from doing that. And I think it's just come down to basically money is controlling everything. And public safety is being put on the back burner. And I don't think that's what the founders intended for this country to be like. I really don't.
Yeah.
The governor must talk about the facts. And when he came out and he had to cut the budget, he said, it's not a spending problem, it's a revenue problem.
Yeah.
I mean, and like I said, totally misleading and deceiving people as to say, it's not my fault. It's you people's fault that you didn't send me enough money.
But then there were other bills that probably should have passed through committees and made it to the House floor, but they were not heard or they were failed in committee. So there were Republicans that could have supported the bill, but I don't think they fully understood it. And some of them came to me privately and said, hey, look, I've got a lot of immigrant, maybe illegals in my district, and so I want to be really careful not to come out and look like I'm, opposing their presence here.
Representative John Payton from District 64, what was your impression of the session down there?
The tire tax on used tires, they're calling it a rim fee, but the bottom line is it created a lot of new regulation trying to track those tires from cradle to grave that nobody really has a grasp on what it's going to cost. And worse than that, being in the automobile business all my life, I see it as destroying the supply chain that moves those tires from the first owner to the second and third owner. And, it's all done in the name of recycling, but the best way to recycle a tire is to put it on another automobile and wear it out. If the regulations that we impose, not just the tax, but the regulation destroys that supply chain, good tires are going to be going to the recycling centers instead of being worn out. And so I think it compounds the problem they're trying to solve. Of course, it's more money out of the people's pockets, and who knows if it'll be enough to cover the expense of tracking them from cradle to grave.
We have State Representative Nell to speak.
Thanks.
State Representative Scott Baltz, what did the governor's office tell you?
The governor's office actually contacted Representative Joe Dett and said that if I didn't vote for Senate Bill 140, that the panic button would never be funded again.
So you voted against the internet sales tax. You did.
I did.
You did the opposite of what the governor wanted you to do.
Yeah.
In fact,
stop. So this is, we're going through our impression of the session. We're exposing actually who controls these legislators. Okay. And it's certainly not from any entity that is outside the Marble Palace establishment. Let's just say that to the least. All right. Now, that was Scott Baltz. He's a Democrat, and Scott Baltz would not vote for the internet sales tax. And because he wouldn't vote for the internet sales tax in committee, the governor killed funding for panic buttons at schools, just so you know. And his statement was they got to him through Joe Jett. Joe Jett contacted Scott Baltz, and Scott Baltz came on the program and talked about it. So, I mean, you tell me who is speaking for the we only want people. The governor says we only want the representatives to represent the people in their district. Really, Governor? Really? All right, now back it up just a hair, and we're gonna bring this home with this experience. Now, keep in mind, it is the governor's assertion that right now it is a utopia down there, and everybody is, it's just basically like Plato's Republic, and everybody is freely representing the wills of their constituents, and everything is working perfectly the way a government should work. That is his assertion, and that it is Conduit that is trying to change that and trying to control things. Listen to, again, back it up just a hair, this is Jerry Cox from the Family Council when he was giving his impression of the session. Listen to this.
140, that the panic button would never be funded again.
So you voted against the internet sales tax. You did.
I did.
You did the opposite of what the governor wanted you to do.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been going to the Capitol really since Bill Clinton was governor, and I think in many ways this legislative body was one of the least independent thinking bodies that I've seen in a long time, because many times, Paul, I would ask a lawmaker about sponsoring a bill, and the first thing they would say was, well, let me go check. Well, check with who? Well, I need to check with House leadership, or I need to check with the governor's office, or I need to check with this group of people. And I'm like, can't you think for yourself? Why do you have to go get permission to file a bill? I thought you were, a strong, independent person out here. But we saw that far too many times. Or a person would file a bill, and then the leadership would say, don't you run that bill. And they would just wilt in the face of that and not run the bill. I had people promise to run bills that we wanted, and then, they'd say, well, I've decided not to run it. Well, why? Well, leadership really doesn't want that. And that's just the end of it then. And so I find that very disappointing. The other thing that concerns me is I'm afraid that the people that the establishment at the Capitol, House leadership, the governor, Senate leadership, and others, I'm afraid the folks that they recruit to run for these vacant seats may be people that are even more so that way, even less independent, even less think on their own, stand on their own kind of people. And so if we end up with a legislative body where a few people say, hey, you have to do what I tell you to do because I got you elected, I've got a PAC over here that's funding you, and you better sit down and be quiet, and you'll do what I tell you to do, then we have lost that autonomy of the legislative branch, and the separate the power then is being consolidated in the hands of just a few people who are able to order everybody else around. Now,
Senator Terry Rice is with us from District 9. Impression of the session 2017.
In one word, it would be frustrated. And all sessions can get frustrating. This one was counting fiscal sessions, which started the first term that I came in the House and served 6 years before moving to the Senate. But this one was, to me, the most frustrating that I've had, and especially through committees I was on, Judiciary and Senate state agencies, I kept thinking, man, our roads are falling apart. We need to come up with a long-term highway plan. We need to be shrinking government. We're almost 2.5 years into a new administration that as people voted to lessen government, and I realize it's a process, it takes time, but we need to be doing that. And there's so many things that I wanted to see addressed, cutting back on this bloated, inflated Medicaid spending. Colleague told me that it was $3.2 billion just a few short years ago. Now it's $7.2 billion. here in Arkansas.
State Representative Greg Leding, he is a Democrat from Fayetteville. What was your...
That's actually funny. The Democrat from Fayetteville, Greg Leding, actually goes on to say he had one of his most productive sessions. But you get the point, don't you, folks? Hey, actually, skip a little ahead there. Can you skip to, let's see, John Payton? Yeah, let's get the very end here. Okay, real quick, I want you to get the very end before we have to go to break. Here's what State Representative John Payton said at the end of our
Conservatives
line.
Still on the defense instead of being on the offense, and trying to fight the fuel tax and the internet tax. So I guess the way I'd sum it up is a missed opportunity.
A missed opportunity. We were playing defense on things you think we wouldn't be playing defense on.
Exactly. I mean, instead of proactively reducing government's impact on our lives, I found myself fighting new and increased taxes and fees, new and increased regulation. Liberty is still in jeopardy.
Liberty is still in jeopardy. That's how it ends. Now, okay, so, again, you guys be the judge, I guess. The truth is out there, if you want it. Now, we are trying to be that medium of truth. We're trying to be that medium of actually an open debate of ideas. A lot of people want to say if you're for a limited government or for shrinking spending or for decreasing dependency on government, all that somehow you're narrow-minded and you want to shut government down. That's actually them projecting. It is with the establishment and with ASA, it is actually, in my opinion, no, there can be no disagreement. It is our way or the highway. It's almost like, it's really the complete opposite. I want to, for example, and I'll give you a perfect example. When the county committees were getting pressure from the governor's office to not allow Jan Morgan to speak, okay? That was offensive to me and offensive to a lot of Arkansans because the Republican Party is supposed to be the party of ideas and open debate and freedom of speech and not try to silence somebody just because you might disagree with them. So I'm perfectly willing, and I think true conservatives are perfectly willing to have the debate and just let the chips fall where they may, right? But now we have people who are actively trying to say in a very hypocritical manner that apparently right now the special interests in Little Rock and the Marble Palace don't exist and that everything is a utopia. It's perfect. It's working great, but it's all of a sudden Conduit News is the problem because the ASA criticized us last week. It's now Conduit News. This is the problem because they're trying to change things. They're trying to control legislators. He said through a media arm, they're trying to control legislators. Now, you just listen to the impression of the session. I was on the entire time covering this. We were covering bills. We were critical of the bills that grew government. We praised the bills that didn't, and yet government grew. So you tell me who's more influential, Governor Asa Hutchinson or a news program that's on 2 hours a day, by the way, just a 2-hour program. Something is interesting, and I'm telling you, to kind of recap this, why did we get attacked last week? I think it's because the corruption in Arkansas government is now being prosecuted. People are admitting they took the bribes. People are admitting or they're caught on tape trying to kill other people in other states. And I think because we have been one of the voices, one of the few voices saying how corrupt we are, and I think that I'm just telling you, I think what ASA was doing last week was an attempt to delegitimize what is truthful, accurate representation of the environment and the Marble Palace in Little Rock and how corrupt it really is. At least that's my analysis for the time being. I reserve the right to change that if facts change or if the new information arises. Just like a good legislator, right? We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to TripleRPawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's rrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's R Pawn at the light in Ash Flat, rrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
This might have been, honestly, this might have been one of the best hours we've ever done when it just comes to sheer truth and information and because it's not just me that is saying these things. It's not just the great articles over at conduitforaction.org that are writing about these things. These are legislators in their own words telling you about the environment down at the Marble Palace, and it directly conflicts with what the governor said last week about outside groups. I mean the I mean, how many outside groups are there? Because most of the groups are inside groups. And that's really the difference is it's like if you're trying to change the way business is done let's be honest, by getting business out of it, politics and business shouldn't be together, but that's the way they like it. And this is an incredible amount of money. And you just got to think, who is making money and getting paid to do certain things versus who is giving money to causes and not getting anything in return, right? There are very few involved in politics. Most people are like, hey, I want medical marijuana. I'm going to pay to get it on the ballot so I can make a lot of money off of it. That's the only reason most people are motivated to do anything in government. Very few just want more liberty, more freedom, more voluntary cooperation for all Arkansans. And that's what I want. Back in a minute.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The prosecutors, Tim, keep dropping these cases. They're actually taking. I mean, it would actually be good. It'd be a waste of time, but you could make the argument that it's a waste of time if you know you're not going to get a conviction to waste the court's time. But I mean, if there was a judge that would rule on this, if some prosecutor would try to charge somebody with the possession of a weapon under this statute, and then the judge says no, sorry, I mean that would set some sort of precedent that might actually help to solidify this. But it's never gotten to that point, has it?
The prosecutors know the law, and they're not going to take a case to court that they're going to lose. They're not going to waste the money. They're not going to risk the bad press. So they understand the law, and what winds up is you have low information voters, as some people call them, that don't know their rights and don't know the law, and so they're afraid to exercise their rights. Yes, we would love a case in court. There's been several of us that have almost begged prosecutors and law enforcement, please arrest me. And as soon as they see that you know what the law says, they quickly steer away from that. No officer wants to arrest someone and have it thrown out. Now, they will say they'll arrest you, but when it comes right down to it, that really doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they certainly that's what's sad is we're not actually getting the end result, because they certainly make the people who get arrested, they make their lives miserable for a time, but eventually the prosecutor just throws the court case. I mean, I'm sorry, does not pursue the charges.
And we haven't had a successful. We don't have a precedent yet. It hasn't went to court. We've been asking for it, but we can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for that, because the law is very clear. If you don't have unlawful intent to employ that weapon against the person, you're not guilty of carrying a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go even further. We still have a $1,000 bounty at Patriots of Act 746 for anyone that can show us the penalty for carrying concealed without a permit.
Yeah.
Or show us where the law says you have to have a permit.
And so, Senator Linda Collins Smith did fire off a letter to the Attorney General Leslie Rutledge asking to see where the penalty is for carrying, right, without a permit. Correct?
That's correct, Paul. I'm actually a little upset. The Attorney General was on your program last week, and I was hoping she would use that opportunity to at least preview what she's going to do with that request for an opinion, and she didn't mention it at all. And I'm hoping that I'm hoping that she goes on and issues the opinion before May 22nd, and she doesn't sit on it until after the primary.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was I kind of dropped the ball there. I didn't ask the question. I should have. I'll be honest, it just slipped my mind. We were doing that interview focused. I was focused more on the PBMs and the the Arkansas works. Well, the Obamacare lawsuit, because I thought it was interesting where ASA is fighting tooth and nail to keep a socialist health care program from a socialist president. And yet another constitutional officer, Leslie Rutledge, is signing on to a lawsuit with other states that would actually end that program if we won. So
that's encouraging to me.
Do what?
That's encouraging to me, because that sets the stage for her to issue a good, clean opinion. I'm just hoping she does it before the primaries. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and call on her to please issue that opinion and get it out as quickly as possible. I know she's a good public servant, and I think her heart's in the right place, and now is the time for her to make sure that the law is clear.
Yeah. And
give a good, clean opinion.
Yeah, and so, again, for folks who are not listening, this may be news to you, but, back in, was it the 90s, Tim, they started issuing those concealed carry permits back in the 90s, right?
That's correct.
And essentially, we don't need those, and yet we've been conditioned psychologically to assume that we have to have those in order to carry a weapon.
Well, and what a lot of folks don't know is, there's 12 states right now that are constitutional carry. 11 of those have concealed weapon permit programs because it's good for reciprocity when you're traveling out of state. It quickens the process for purchasing a weapon from an FFL. There's a reason for a permit if you choose to get it, but you don't need one in Arkansas. If you're going to be carrying in Arkansas, you can carry open and concealed. There's no law you're going to break if you do that.
And see,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. It's hour number 2. If you missed the first hour of the program, I want to urge you to go back and listen to it. If you're watching on Facebook Live right now, wait another hour until this the full video is concluded, and you can go back. You can get it right now at the podcast, iTunes or SoundCloud audio only. But just, what did we title it, Joe? What was it? The truth about control in Little Rock. You want to know the truth about who controls who? We, not in my words, but in legislators' own words, talked about this, and so you definitely need to go back and listen to it. I think it was one of the best hours that we've ever done. Hey, joining us now, we have in studio, we got State Representative Brant Smith is with us. Brant, welcome back to the program,
Well,
sir.
good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Real quick, what's going on with the legislature right now? Is the special session still going on?
No, it ended last Thursday.
Okay, and everything got wrapped up?
Everything's wrapped up, and we're just ready for basic committee meetings from time to time and maybe some other business, but we're done.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on being elected the whip of the caucus.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be the majority House whip and just serve not only the caucus but the people of our great state.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'm excited about that, and because I know what your voting record is, and so it's good to whip that platform of the Republican Party.
Well, and here's the thing: the word whip has a negative, definition attached, but to me, it's more about influence. It's more about encouraging legislators to, at least in the Republican Party, and I would even encourage Democrats to support the Republican Party platform. It's a good platform.
It is a good
but
one.
just to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to
So
do.
there's an old Seinfeld episode where they ask, well, what does the whip do? And Kramer's like, well, because Kramer doesn't know. He just talks to him. Well, in the olden days, if people weren't voting the way the party wanted to, they whipped them.
Fortunately, we don't actually tie anybody to a post and make them conform, but there is an opportunity for me to show influence. Well, I would have been whipped a lot.
yeah,
and was as a child, so I don't want to go back to those days.
Recently, we're talking with State Representative Brant Smith. Recently, you were. I'm sorry. Let's just talk about the letters to the editor. So there was a letter to the editor from Senator John Cooper. Now you represent District 58. Okay, which is you're actually my state representative. So congratulations on having that honor. I moved. I was in Ladyman's district, and he's very relieved that I'm
his
no
loss
longer.
is my gain.
Oh, okay. All right. I appreciate that. So you're in 58, which is in Jonesboro, and so Senator John Cooper, who is the senator for a good part of Craighead County, he actually penned a letter to the editor critical of you and 3 of your colleagues from this area in Craighead County and the House because of your vote against the DHS budget that included Arkansas Works Obamacare. And he was very critical. There was a response from State Representative Dan Sullivan that I thought was really good. What's your reaction to that letter from Senator Cooper?
Well, first of all, John has been a good friend of mine for a long time. And, he did veer off in a different direction after he was elected to the Senate, and it created some concern or wonder what happened. And but the rest of us have been consistent. We've done what we said we'd do, and we've voted very conservatively over the last 2 sessions. And so when his letter came out, and I usually read early in the morning, it was just sad to me because I know the depth of our friendship. And so after I attended 2 banquets and sat next to his table last Friday night a week ago, and then the next night on Saturday night, we were seated at the same table. And it was a little quiet. Conversation wasn't as jovial as it typically was. But after I got home, I've got it here on my phone, 10:28, I got a text message. And he makes several comments, but then he concludes by saying, "You are better than that. You can't excuse that vote." So I sat there in my chair, and I was just thinking, if he could just let it go. Each legislator is responsible to his or her constituents for the votes they cast. No one should be publicly attacked like he attacked us. And so I mean,
if the situation were reversed,
he would be really angry with us.
And the establishment would be feigning this, virtue
So here's what I
signal.
wrote him back, and I'm just going to read it if you've got time.
Absolutely.
When you were near death, your colleagues prayed for you, visited you, and showed a lot of concern. You repaid our kindness with a very public and offensive letter to the editor. Every one of us have consistently voted against the private option in Arkansas Works. I would have supported SB 30 if the Arkansas Works portion had been pulled out for a separate vote. Unfortunately, it was not. When we get waiver number 2, which is reducing the eligibility rate poverty levels, from 138 down to 100%, I'll be more favorable. What you have done is the most mean-spirited thing I've ever seen happen from a friend. You will certainly have a primary opponent in the next election cycle. I would suggest you write a second letter to the editor apologizing to your colleagues.
Wow.
And then I blocked him from my phone and from my Facebook page. I just felt like I'm not going to be hammered repeatedly over this. So he's one of the few people I've blocked in my life.
Wow.
And I just thought I can't go any further with that.
Yeah, and if you read the letter, and I guess we read it on Thursday or Friday, and then we read State Representative Sullivan's response to it, and now your response to it. I mean, it's just it's interesting that just a difference of opinion. He would turn around and really use Democrat talking points to try to demagogue, health care, and he'd said everything but throw people out of nursing homes. You know what I mean? Or throw Granny off the cliff. That's kind of the way he went with it, and I thought that was very interesting. Now, Brent, I want to ask you this because he also made another accusation, Senator Cooper, and I have said for a long time. Anytime I talk about Senator John Cooper, it is a personal thing with me because I helped him get elected, and I believed in him. I thought he was a guy of principle, and I thought he really did believe in smaller government, and that's not to be true. And I'm really kind of ashamed that I was used in that capacity. But hey, there's lots of people that get duped by politicians and everything else. But he made an allegation that the reason you voted against the DHS budget that had Obamacare Arkansas Works in it wasn't because of principle or your personal beliefs. It was because of Conduit, what he calls an extreme Tea Party, extreme Tea Party organizations and Conduit. And I guess my question is that why you did it?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I haven't spoken with anyone from Conduit at the top as far as Brenda goes and Joe goes.
And they're going to be on, by the way, at the bottom of this hour.
Well, for more than probably a year. And they don't call me. They don't talk to me. They don't push me to cast certain votes. What motivates me are the promises that I made to District 58 back in 2014 when they elected me for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. And I stuck by my principles and my integrity, and actually during the second election, I basically spoke in front of constituents then saying I did what I said I would do.
Yes, you did, yeah.
And as a result, I don't even have an opponent this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be the first time in Arkansas history that a Republican not only has been elected twice consecutively to the state house
from this district.
From this district, but I'm elected already for a third time, and I just think what an honor and a privilege. And I did have some people say, hey, you can vote any way you want now because you don't have an opponent, you're safe.
Really?
So
wow.
And this was coming from the other side, the less conservative side, and I just thought, why would I do that to the people who have trusted me? I said, no, I'm going to hold my ground. And, like I said, I wanted to get to yes. I was there when SEMA was present and presented the first waiver. And I went
from the
down.
Trump administration.
Yes, and I went downstairs and sat in on a second conversation. And I really appreciated everything that happened during that time at the Capitol. But until we can get a little more of what has been promised or we're pushing for.
Which was the cost savings.
Yes,
I mean, that's what the cost savings were.
Until we could do that, I just stuck to my initial promise and said I can't do it. But as I read, I even told Senator Cooper, if we could get the second waiver, I would be more favorable.
Right. And I think a lot of people would have been in that boat
because we're
as well.
moving the ball down the field to the end state.
Yeah.
Let's reduce the size of the program. Let's get working, eligible working adults off and back to work.
Right.
Let's give them something to be proud of themselves for, and that's a paycheck.
You mentioned your victory. We're talking with State Representative Brant Smith. So you mentioned you won. You had a Democrat opponent, which I believe actually was fielded by some establishment Republican interests. Or at least that's that was my gut feeling.
Maybe.
Because of your conservative voting record. And, of course, you defeated him by 12 points.
Right.
So it was a massive. Now, I'm just curious, Senator Cooper and the establishment, put pressure on you here. Senator Cooper writes this article, criticizes Conduit. This was almost 5 days before the governor came out and recently started criticizing Conduit. So we have a consistency of messages here in a few days. And so I'm wondering, in the past, have you ever received any pressure or anything from the establishment concerning, how you should run your campaign?
Well, back in 2016, I put some money into political advertising, radio, on your program.
Yeah.
And I had designated those funds weeks before I received a PAC check from our governor, his PAC. And so it looked like I had taken, to an outsider that didn't really know how I was budgeting, they would have said, okay, you got this money from our governor, and now you put it straight into Paul Harrell's program. At that point, Paul, I didn't even know that you had done some reshuffling and had come under what is now known as Conduit Media.
Yeah.
So, because if you remember the day I said, Paul, who do I make the check out to? You? And you said, no. Conduit Media.
Right, right.
At first I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to put a bullseye on me now for sure, because
either way it would.
Well, yeah, but there was already one on me, but then this one glowed in the dark.
So you're saying you got pressure after you made an ad buy. By the way, you won by 12 points. We're on a great station, out of Northeast Arkansas. It's very well listened to by conservatives. And your ads,
it's my base.
Exactly. And your ads were, this is what I told you, I did what I said I was going to do, and you won by 12 points. And that's one of the reasons why. In my opinion, but you're saying you got pushback from establishment Republicans for advertising on this program?
Again, Senator Cooper let me know he was very disappointed in me, and I think even embarrassed that I would put campaign funds into the program.
See, John wasn't embarrassed to come on this program on almost a daily basis when he was running in the special election for his current seat. And I feel like I need to make that
point I'm making today about that is I've not changed. I'm the same guy that I was back when I first started this political journey. And I'm for those conservatives out there that are listening this morning, you don't have to worry about supporting the Paul Harrell program. You don't have to worry about supporting Conduit. yes, they stir people up. But isn't it time that we are stirred a little bit? Because if you don't like what you're seeing and what's happening, this is one avenue that you can use to make sure that at least all the little moving parts are kind of spotlighted.
Yeah. That's exactly. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, how long have we known each other?
Gosh, Brant, I don't know how long.
It's been a while. Your pastor's been a friend of mine for decades.
2012 or something.
So we go back a long way.
Yeah.
And I'm loyal, and I have repeatedly said over and over, I'm not going to go on social media, and blast my governor. I'm not going to do it, but I mean, he's gone out a few times and spoken against pieces of legislation that I wanted to run, and was even asked me to pull bills that I felt were important.
And you didn't pull the American law.
I didn't pull them. No, I didn't pull anything that I was asked. But we still communicate, we talk, we shake hands. And I think that's the way our system is supposed to work.
Yeah.
One side says, I don't like your bill. Is there something we can do to get you to pull it down, or would you pull it? And if that person says, no, I'm going to run my bill, well, then let it go to committee. And if it lives through committee and makes it off the House floor and the Senate floor, it must mean that people are supporting.
Well, and what's sad is like I agree. I think you are describing it exactly the way it's supposed to be, and I really am. It's a shame that you're going to get described as being someone who's just controlled or dogmatic when, like you said, it's no, I'm not going to back down.
You remember the?
I mean, you look at American law and American courts. Okay,
right.
You did not back down based on principle, and it eventually went into law. The governor never signed it. But that's not a bill that I had. I mean, I personally had a lot of interest in it. But if you look at Conduit, which is about economic freedom, they didn't have.
Yeah, they had no interest.
They had
in
no
that
interest
bill
at all. Didn't score it or anything.
No.
So I mean, what gives here?
Well, and I was proud of the governor for not vetoing the bill.
Right.
And so I've been grateful for that. He could have very easily, and then it would have been a lot more difficult to override the governor's veto.
Yeah.
So. For what it's worth, I'm trying to work with both sides, even within the Republican Party.
Yeah, both sides in the Republican Party.
Different sides, and for the Republican caucus to elect me as their whip, Marcus Richmond as their majority leader, and Mary Bentley as our secretary, I'm telling you, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I have so much respect for our members that for them to give me this opportunity shows that there must be a lot more conservatism there than what maybe some people think. It's just they need boldness out front.
Yeah, I hope
to give them courage.
Yeah, that's a good optimistic view, and I so appreciate you coming on the program, and I appreciate your comments. Appreciate what you've done and your voting record, and State Representative Brant Smith. It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's my privilege, and my phone may blow up today. But,
sorry,
we'll see.
Okay. Hopefully we didn't paint a new target. All right, folks, we got to take a break. Thanks so much for listening to the program. It's Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment.
conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you.
Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions.
Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much. Back to the program. My apologies. I'm doing a little conversating, I guess, is what you could call it. I want to remind everybody out there, if you have not listened, if you missed the first hour of the program, you need to go back and listen to it because it was a very comprehensive program where we, I think, kind of just put to bed the notion that Little Rock as is devoid of special interest and control, specifically control from the governor's office, meaning and the leadership. And there is an allergy. There is an allergy to true limited government conservatism among the Republican establishment at the Marble Palace. And this program is an antihistamine. So we're going to continue speaking the truth. And that would be a bumper, right? There's an allergy. And this program is the NyQuil. I don't know. Anyway, we will be back here in just a moment with Conduit co-founders Mr. Joe Maynard and Brenda Vassar-Taylor. Don't go anywhere. You want to catch this next segment. Back in a moment. This is such, I mean, it shouldn't be provocative, but it is, and this is the great work that the Patriots Fact 746 are doing. You guys are, again, on a mission to educate about what the law actually says, and I so appreciate you coming on the program, Tim. And before we go, you guys have, there's a Jan Morgan event coming up. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The Patriots Fact 746, the Northeast Arkansas chapter, we started it around the end of November of 2017, and we're up over 600 members right now.
Wow.
And we're going to go ahead and sponsor a dinner with Jan here in Randolph County coming up on the 16th. It's going to be in Randolph County at the Christopher Court Building, and the address is 128 Mockingbird Road, Pocahontas. We're going to have barbecue butt sandwiches and all the fixings, and it's $10 a person or $15 a couple. All the proceeds that we get from that's going to go to Jan for governor. Seating is limited, so I would encourage everyone to call 870-215-3726. We are selling tickets at the door, but get your name on the list. That way you make sure you don't get turned away.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's in Pocahontas, and that's I guess that's what, on Friday, right?
That's on Friday the 16th at 6 p.m.
All right.
Jan's going to be the keynote speaker, and folks will have a chance to hear what she's going to do for the state. And let's be honest, there's a clear difference. If we're just talking 2A, Second Amendment, there's a clear difference between Jan and Asa. There's a clear choice. And we're at Ronald Reagan said we're at a time of choosing. We're very close to losing our Second Amendment rights because we're not being active as a population. And it's time, if you want to keep your rights, we're going to need to elect Jan Morgan. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's on a lot of issues. I'm glad you bring up specifically the Second Amendment, but there's so much pushback from the establishment, Tim, and it's all because we don't agree. We just simply don't agree with the way they're doing things, and we want to hold people who have the power to take our money, to take our guns, and take our freedom accountable. And there is a massive negative response right now by those in power because you are speaking the truth. This program is speaking the truth. And, people complain about a negative atmosphere, but that's the negative atmosphere is not us speaking the truth. It's their response to the truth that's creating a negative atmosphere. So I think that's funny. But I'll give you the last word.
If we don't have the Second Amendment, if they can take our Second Amendment rights, then they can take any right they want. It really is that simple. Now, there's a lot of other issues. We've increased spending in Arkansas almost, $600 billion in 4 years.
$600 million.
Asa never met a tax that he didn't like. Cradle to grave tires, gas tax.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. Hey, welcome to the program. We have Conduit co-founders Joe Maynard and Brenda Vassar-Taylor on the line. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Great, Paul. Thanks for letting us come on.
Well, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the criticism that not only Conduit News received last week from Governor Asa Hutchinson, but also just really Conduit in general. What just initially, what's the response from you guys on that?
I'll let Joe start and then I'll add.
Well, Paul, it seems just surreal what the words they have chosen to use that seem well coordinated between the newspapers and the governor and some of his henchmen in the media, the liberals, they all are using, I guess they've had a meeting and decided, we're going to use words like untrue, fringes, radicals, 100% agreement, those kind of buzzwords that we've heard from time to time, but now it seems to be a concerted and coordinated effort. I don't know where this is going to end up, but I suspect that this is more the beginning than the end of something, because they really have to delegitimize the only apparent resistance to their move to bigger government and socialism. For example, Jim Hendren will say, what we say is put out as untrue. Well, but they never seem to zero in on what exactly is untrue, and we footnote everything we put out there. They use the word fringe. We're the fringe, like the KKK or the militia or something. Well, what fringe? I mean, what do you mean fringe? I mean, where do we differ from the Republican platform? Exactly as written. Evidently, that makes us radicals in some people's view. And then another tack they take is if you don't agree with them 100%, then they attack you. Well, two things on that. In our annual or semi-annual or biannual rankings and awards, there is nobody that's ever been 100%. And we don't expect that. But the thing about it is, what does the Republican Party stand for today? We originally became active to promote the Republican Party and its members to promote the Republican agenda, and they left us.
Well, and my response would be, and Joe and I do talk in extremes sometimes so that people can understand, but I'm starting to worry that this is not an extreme, that free speech appears to be on life support in Arkansas. I mean, when you're a small group like ours, and certainly they want to imply or not imply, state and declare an untruth that Joe Maynard is the sole support of Conduit, which, of course, I personally take great offense to that, as we would imagine, but that's just simply not true. Our information is transparent, as they want to pretend it's not. They use ASA used words like funneling to indicate some kind of nefarious, illegal activity. Our information is there on the Secretary of State's website as it relates to contributions from our PACs to candidates, and we were fortunate enough in 2014 to work hard and have a lot of support to elect a lot of the people who serve today, including Brant Smith, who was on your show a few minutes ago. We appreciate the work that Brant's done. And Brant's statement that we haven't even talked in a year is very indicative of how we operate. Why would we call people who are, voting according to the district and how they got elected? And so when we call out the fact that there are those who only want to find out what they can do to help special groups get something from government, we become the enemy, and free speech is not allowed. I mean, 5 articles in statewide papers this week against us? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's laughable. And Wesley Brown from the Talk Business Politics, he emails us, I'm sorry I didn't get your response I went ahead and did the article against you guys on Wednesday without your side. Do you want to give me your side now? I send him the email and crickets back, and he hasn't published the response yet. I mean, I am saddened by the state of affairs in Arkansas.
Yeah, no doubt, and I liked having. I like what Brant Smith said too, because the whole idea, if you listen to the governor's comments, he is really projecting this concept of control. He mentions political action committees, but it's almost as if he's trying to suggest that there are no other political action committees out there that are trying to give money to candidates. And that somehow, Conduit is it. That's the only one. That's the only one we need to focus on. And yet, if you don't, it's not just Brand. I mean, you talk to any of these guys, who have conservative voting records. There's not that conversation doesn't happen like, hey, you've got to vote this way. That conversation does happen, though, when you take money from Big Pharma and Big Medicaid, because they expect something for their money. You just talk a little bit about that dichotomy, how you have one side that gets no criticism when they give money to candidates and expect special favors in return. You have another side that gives money to candidates and doesn't expect anything in return because the support is based on limited government principles. Respond to that.
Well, it's interesting if anybody would take the time to look at the very lowest depth, that you find from 2013 on, there's been over 100 PACs that contributions to Asa Hutchinson himself. And just in 2017, there's been 22 that have given to him, and I would say that's right and proper. I mean, that is free speech. And we have no problem, nor should anybody, with a political action committee formed to promote an agenda. That is the purpose of them. Disclosing what that agenda is something we do all the time. The others don't seem to. They certainly don't go to Republican committee meetings and explain themselves and then take questions. None of them do that.
As we did.
As we do. And, it's interesting that medical contributions are significant in the past 5 years to most of these public officials. And, ACE's statement of financial interest shows that he has some financial interests in several medical companies. In addition to that, there's $4.5 million he collected to get elected in 2014, and $1.5 million for this primary.
Too bad.
So, want to talk about money? We're the.
Well, it's a David and Goliath situation. I mean, if you really want to have a good comparison.
I mean, ours is a fraction of what the real special interests that want something from government.
Well, and it is. It's gotten to the point that it's very embarrassing for us personally to see our statewide media react like this. Our governor react like this to small business people wanting to have an effect on the policies of government from their perspective. And, we've said, and our governor has said, you need to look and see what these people want. They have an agenda, and he's busy defining our agenda. I want to tell you a little bit about our agenda. I mean, Joe is a manufacturer, industrial and aircraft parts. He's done this for 35 years. He's built it from his bedroom. I mean, he's the typical small business guy in Arkansas who prefers to keep his tax dollars to give raises to his employees and not have our government take the tax dollars to bring new people in, even from China, to pay his people more to go to work for them. And there's an article in the paper from Acres today, op-ed on that subject. Those are the kind of things that we say. I'm a tax attorney. I've done this for nearly 40 years. I represent small business. People can contact our customers, our clients. We have a reputation in business. We work hard. What do we want for this work? I'm laughing with Joe a few minutes ago. This is our estate plan. I mean, we're carrying out the ultimate estate plan for our children and grandchildren to have freedom. We want less government. And because we want to reduce the size of the increases in government, you'd think we exploded a nuclear bomb. I mean, the likes of Max Brantley and John Brummett and Asa Hutchinson have said we're trying to destroy government. I mean, we're just trying to limit the size of the increase, for crying out loud. It's sadly laughable.
What it tells
it is amazing the words they use, and they're effective, obviously, with people that don't really pay attention. Like we're harsh. I mean, are we harsh? Are you harsh, Paul?
Apparently, the governor said so. He said, "I'm a harsh, angry voice," or we collectively are. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess we're also unprincipled, which I would point to the Republican platform if you want to know what our principles are. I'm not sure. They're trying to evolve. I've noticed over the past few years they're trying to evolve the Republican platform to kind of cover their mess up. But one of the words they've used a lot is attack. Now, I don't want to be involved in somebody that is just attacking somebody. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to expose things that we believe are wrong and to bring the public's attention to them. And whatever the public decides is fine with us. I mean, it really is.
As long as we're educated.
We just want an educated public that knows what's going on, that won't just say they're all crooked and throw their hands up and leave it with the crooked people to handle because they're disgusted. We need to engage and decide who we want to be as a state. I mean, we've been doing this for several years, and we have talked to small business all over the state, and there's pretty common perception and recognition of what's wrong, and most people in business fully understand what's wrong because it affects them.
Yeah.
Because that's the only place to get more money. But I wanted to share something with you. I believe we have talked about this before, but for the audience's sake, one of the more powerful things in my education process, starting 5 or 6 years ago, that kind of drives me, and that I wish more people would consider that are in business, even amongst the threats that they all face for speaking out. And it's the Samuel Adams quote from August 1, 1776. And it goes as follows: "If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude than the animated contests of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen." And that's pretty much what made me decide to commit to preserving liberty as a second job, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to just ask our listeners, and you know, sadly for Arkansas, overwhelmingly, the vast number of people have no idea about this conversation. They've seen that there's a group that ASA has come out to defend the state's freedom against. You know, but if people really want to have less government intervention in their lives, you know, we need some help. You heard Brant talk about how the establishment is, you know, put a target on your back if you're friendly with Conduit. In 2014, I mean, Joe and I physically and financially worked hard to get others to help us who did, and we helped elect a lot of the people, including Brant Smith, who are in Little Rock right now, who want to do the right thing. And, you know, they need help in what they're doing, and we need help to help them to continue the battle and what they promised when they got elected. But our governor has said, we want to control people. We, Conduit, want to control people. I'll give you a short little story of one of our first lessons, what we could expect in this administration. We had helped elect a lot of Republicans in 2014. Joe and I had physically gone out in the races, hammered signs, shook hands, and in January 2015, you know, our foundation of our agenda was we want less government. Of course, Medicaid expansion was the white elephant in the room, and that was a big deal. People were against it. They wanted no more Medicaid expansion, Obamacare, get rid of it. So we helped elect conservative Republicans, and the night before Senator Jim Hendren filed his SB 96 bill, which, quote, ends it, which we know kept it going and expanded it, Medicaid expansion, that is, the governor called me personally on my cell phone and told me, Brenda, if you guys do not support my bill that Jim's going to file tomorrow, you'll never get another thing done in this state.
Wow.
And if you don't support my tax increase of the capital gains tax, which he was removing that reduction, he was going to increase capital gains. If you don't support that, you will not do anything else in Little Rock. And I told him how sad I was to hear that, but we had worked hard on one position, and we were not changing our position now. And that situation and that conflict between us has grown. And when he said the other day, I've been watching this group for a while, you know, we were commonly meeting with Jim Hendren, the governor. These people were people we were helping put in place and to help our state become an economic benefit for all its citizens, not just a source for handing out government dollars. And anyhow, we've stood firm with where we are, and you can see this is how you're treated in this state if you want smaller government.
Yeah, there's a difference. The difference between that's an amazing story that Asa said. If you won't support, that capital gains tax increase was a joke, and I mean that was they increased capital gains taxes when they said that they weren't going to, and then of course they had to decrease them later because there was such an outrage. But that was kind of that happened immediately when Asa took office, that they raised taxes, and it was very, 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 very strange. And I think that's really sad that he called and said, if you don't support this, you're never going to get another thing done. But now there's something a little different here because he's now wanting to bring the news media, the statewide media. He wants to use his bully pulpit to try to call out what we're doing. And tell me if you guys disagree with this. But I think if you look at the big money interests that people who are concerned about liberty are fighting, that you guys are fighting, that I'm fighting, then you have what is relatively, Joe mentioned this earlier, a small amount of money comparatively. When you take a small amount of money and you pair it with liberty and ideas about freedom, it's a very effective thing. I think what we are selling. There are way more of us who care about freedom than there are those who care about that special interest. We just got to get the message out to the people, and I think he is actively trying to combat the effectiveness of our message as the audience grows.
Well, we've got the primaries coming up in May, and we have a lot of candidates that we will support, and he will try to defeat. He has recruited opponents for incumbents. And then we have the issue 1 on the bad tort reform bill that he'll try to promote. It's like he's taking talking points from our website, and that's why he says that bill is good.
Yeah, this will all end in November. The conservative messaging and activities will all end in November, we suspect. But one of the things I wanted to mention that seems a disconnect with the public is we're talking about an administration that is consolidating power with the Speaker of the House. And they supported and defended people like John Wood, Mike Neal, and Jake Files. I mean, these are the people that some of them are under indictment, and these are the people that this administration backed during elections and protected. Why is that? I mean, we didn't make that happen. We didn't make this up. It's not fake news.
We did run a candidate against John Wood.
That's right. We've known about John Woods for 5 years,
as have other people,
and as have most there, and it's fairly common knowledge. But I see there are going to be a lot more as time goes on, indictments and charges, and these people have circled the wagons and turn their guns out, and they're shooting at the people.
Yeah.
Instead of, they accuse us of doing a circular firing squad, but if people think about it, what they've done is they've turned that circular firing squad outward and started firing at the people that expect them to be accountable for their words.
Yeah.
If there's anything that the listener or the voters need to learn about politics, and right now it's on display full blown, is our sixth principle, according to Conduit, of how they grow government, and that's projection deflection strategy. When our governor accuses us of whatever, I'm laughing because anyone who knows anything knows he's describing what he does, and so intimidation is a big tool. I remember in a restaurant, Joe and I met with Jim Hendren, and anyone who knows him, he's a big guy, 6'4", whatever. I'm 5'3". He starts screaming at me. We're sitting there. Joe's sort of in shock. I'm sort of mad because Joe's not up physically defending me. But I watch. That's a strategy. That's intimidation is one strategy. But projecting what they're doing first and saying it first before we can accuse them is a way to dilute any message that we would put out.
Hey, last question.
So when they're supporting people who are indicted or about to be, oh no, you support them.
Well, Jim Hendren, Senator Hendren is a fighter pilot, right?
I think he may have mentioned that before somewhere on social media, but only once, though.
Yeah, well, so was Duke Cunningham, if you'll remember.
They don't know who Duke Cunningham is.
Well, he was the California representative that went to jail a few years back for corruption.
So let me get real quick. We got to go to break. Last question. Do you think the Governor Asa Hutchinson doing what he's doing, calling out Conduit News, as well as just you guys, Joe and Brenda and everything, do you think there's an element of intimidation to get other people to not contribute to the organizations and the work that you guys are doing to stand up for small businesses in Arkansas?
Well, there's no question about it. We've got many, many examples of that. And it's really almost pathetic that a governor of a state would try to demonize two individuals that are fighting for his party's platform that are just private citizens. If we have no ambitions to get rich off of government or to get contracts or to amass power or to be elected, we have none of these things. But we can go on about our business and forget all this stuff and be a heck of a lot better off in life.
But I'll say one thing, we are a small group, 5 of us, 3 of us are attorneys. If the governor wants to continue attacking private citizens, bring it on, because it might be the best thing the state could see is a lawsuit with a lot of information.
Yeah, Paul, you know as well as I do, this is why many people don't want to get into politics. They don't want to run for office. Well, those people that don't want to run for office, that have life experience, that have business experience, they're the ones that should run for office. But it takes a considerable amount of money to get elected to even the House or Senate. Who would have thought $250,000, $250,000 it takes for a Republican primary? That is insane. And when we spend, a few $10,000 worth from contributors of ours, that's all of a sudden a foul.
Yeah.
It's
only
insane.
because it's outside and it's trying to upset the status quo of the way things are doing, and it's exposing the truth to the people. Joe Maynard, Brenda Vassar-Taylor, Conduit co-founders, thank you guys so much for coming on this morning and setting the record straight.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later. Folks, we got to go to break. Back in a moment.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Rounding up this Monday's broadcast of Conduit News Radio, I want to encourage you. First of all, we're going to go subscribe to us on YouTube, Conduit News on YouTube, because we're going to have the interview you just heard clipped out separately. We're going to have Brant Smith's interview just heard clipped out separately, and we're probably going to clip out the entire first hour only of the program where we did a flashback and listened to our impression of the session. We forever put to bed who's controlling who in Little Rock and the Marble Palace. That is all the time I have for today. We're going to be right back here at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I hope everyone has a great Monday, and I hope it's the beginning to a prosperous week for you guys. Arkansas, thanks for listening. Be safe.